I'm delighted to welcome today Cherry Scott from Bristol. It's such a lovely, pretty name, Cherry.
Thank you.
Welcome. Is there a story behind why you were named Cherry?
Oh, well, I'm actually a Cheryl, but I've always
Ah,
been,
okay,
but I've always been called Cherry.
right,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
So I wondered if there was some kind of story that Dad went out to buy a jam tart and came back with a cherry on top or something like that.
No,
Okay,
I
my
don't know
my
if I was
mother.
named Cheryl, but always called Cherry.
Right.
So
My
yeah.
mum was called Norma, and that was because my granddad uh, was into Norma Jean. Um,
Ah,
so there we go. Okay, so welcome. So Cherry, you're from Bristol, or currently living in Bristol. Is that where you're from originally?
yeah, not far from here. Yeah, this is where I was
Cool.
brought up.
Yeah, it's a lovely area. When I lived in Malmesbury, North Wiltshire, I often visited Bristol and got fond memories of Bristol and Bath and all that area. But as listeners will know, I'm currently in the Algarve in Portugal and loving every minute of it.
Yeah, wonderful.
So, Cherry, we've met through various different networks and also with a health connection. And you've been working with Usana vitamins for quite some time, which we'll come on to later. So that's a health link. But you started off as a maths teacher, apparently. Tell us how long ago that was and why
Oh my
maths.
goodness, I don't want to say how long ago it was. Too long. A long time ago, over 40 years ago. Yes, I started off as a maths teacher, only because I was good at maths at school and without really knowing where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. I think I thought I always wanted to work with children, so I trained in teaching and ended up teaching maths. Um, yeah, but I think it was challenging right from the beginning. In fact, before I even started, as soon as I qualified, I went to the States for 9 months. Then I came back before I started teaching. And after my first full year of teaching, my whatever they called it back then, probationary year or something, um, I took another nearly a year out and went travelling. I think I was always trying to escape from teaching, really, and was probably just looking for the right thing for me. So I've been in and out of teaching for quite a few years, but not taught for quite a few years now.
Teaching is a really useful skill that you can transfer to any environment, really, can't you? If you have the ability, and you obviously was taught through your training to structure teaching in some way or another, which presumably you use today, do you?
Um, I think yes, yes, I definitely do. I am in teaching in some form. Yeah, I'm not classroom teaching, but I think all the teaching skills have been very useful in all the other things that I've done and in my current business. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
always very interesting to me when you're talking about the different supplements, how you explain what they are, what they're for, what they contain, all this kind of thing. So I would recognise you and take my hat off to you as a teacher. So well done for keeping that skill on. After a maths teacher, you escaped from maths teaching. You ran a cafe apparently.
I escaped briefly, yes. I ran a cafe for a couple of years, which was in Bristol, vegetarian cafe, and then had my first child, my daughter, um, and then 2 years later had my son. And after that, it was like, well, what do I do next? And I liked the idea of having my own business actually. In fact, before I got pregnant the second time, I'd started exploring setting up a business. It was going to be something, possibly cafe, but along the health and environmental lines, some kind of shop with a cafe. And then I got pregnant. So that was kind of put on the back burner. And when I had two children, the I think the prospect of starting a business was just too much with two little children. So going back to teaching seemed at the time to be the easiest thing I could do. And a friend of mine was working in a college. And she said, well, they always need maths teachers in the college where she was in Bristol, in Stonewall College. So I started looking into that and realised, yes, I could. All the colleges were crying out for maths teachers. So I started off part time and just doing some GCSE reset sits and some access to nursing courses and all kinds of different, some A levels, in the city of Bristol and Filton College, and then started at UE. So I had a few years teaching part-time to first year. They were engineers or business. They weren't doing maths degrees, but they were all students, undergraduates who needed some maths teaching in there as part of their degree. So I did that, and that was good, easier than being in a school. It was definitely better than being classroom teaching. Didn't have the discipline problems. So that was great, but I think I still it wasn't really who I was. And I had a little gap from teaching. And during that time, I'd had a few treatments with a shiatsu practitioner. Absolutely loved shiatsu. I'm sure you've had shiatsu, Elaine, but if
I
you
have,
haven't,
yes. Yeah.
amazing. Yeah. And I just loved it. And then I had this little gap between contracts of teaching and was doing various other things. And one of the things I did was a kind of like a weekly, like an evening class in shiatsu. And I thought, wow, I could retrain as a shiatsu practitioner. So the opportunity arose, and that's what I did. And 2.5 years to train, which I was doing alongside my lecturing at UE. And so I qualified, and around the same time, as I was kind of getting to the end of my course, one of the other students in the class introduced me to some supplements. It was because of I was having various health challenges, nothing like really major, but just general headaches, feeling run down, feeling tired, lots of sore throats, kept getting really painful mouth ulcers, and all those kind of just feeling run down. And my friend Sophia said, have you heard of these supplements? And I was very kind of dismissive, actually. Like, oh no, I have a good diet and I don't need supplements and that kind of thing. And then another friend said to me, have you heard of these supplements? Have you heard of Usana? So then you kind of go, oh, that's really strange. No such thing as a coincidence. So then it was like, okay, well, I'll just try them. I'm sure they're not going to make any difference. I ordered them. I think they stayed in the cupboard for a few weeks before I actually got around to opening them and starting them. And then within a week, it's like, oh my goodness, I can't believe how different I already feel. And I just started telling people about them, and just in conversation, just started, like, they're amazing. You should try these supplements. And then, yeah, one thing led to another, and I realized that I don't want to be teaching anymore. So I finished that term, didn't renew my contract, and set up a business alongside my then shiatsu business. I'd just qualified, and I knew that the Usana would fit in alongside that. The shiatsu didn't continue, but the Usana has now for 23 years. So,
Wow, goodness.
yeah, so that's really where my passion is. Yeah.
Excellent. So now we've got on to Usana. There are so many different types of supplement on the market, and listeners will probably already know that we used to have all the nutrition that we needed from food way back in the day when the soil was good and the seeds were good and so on and so forth, and no glycosidates and what do you call the chemicals and whatnot in the sprays and so on. So those days are long gone. So we do need supplementation now. Many people need supplementation, not everybody, but a lot of us do need supplementation. And as you know, I'm a great believer in testing to see what supplements we need. However, not everybody's able to do the supplementation testing. So how would you advise anybody who's thinking, a bit like you, a bit run down, coughs, colds, sore throats, whatever it is, how would you what would be the first supplement you would introduce them to?
What I learned and what I found when I was introduced to Usana, first of all, is the importance of balance. So if you're like like you were saying, if you can be tested, that's one thing. But for a lot, and actually, even when people are tested, one day they might test differently to another day, depending on all sorts of things, what they're eating and all kinds of things. But when you take a really good quality multivitamin, it's like having a really good quality diet. So a good multivitamin is just food. It's just concentrated, nutritious food. And as you say, years ago, of course, we should be able to get everything we can that we need from a healthy diet. But the reality is that it's just virtually impossible. There are a few people that manage to do it through a very strict organic diet, but they're probably, spending all day cooking and preparing and juicing, and it's almost impossible, really hard for the majority of people to do. The first place to start is a really high quality multivitamin, high quality, but also high levels of nutrients and a wide range. So a lot of people will start off, what choices, when I often talk to people and may ask, well, do you take supplements now? And they'll take maybe, oh, I need vitamin B for this, and I take some vitamin C in the winter, and oh yes, and sometimes I remember to take my vitamin D, and maybe they take a mineral or a calcium. Oh, I need calcium for my bones. But of course, when you just take a few single vitamins or single minerals, one affects another, and you can cause a deficiency, a depletion of other vitamins or minerals when you just take one or two or three. So taking a really good mix so the Usana multivitamin has around 60 different ingredients in it. So it's not just your A, B, C and your calcium, selenium, copper, whatever. It's got a much wider range. So that's a good place to start. And it's not replacing a healthy diet. I always recommend people have as healthy a diet as they can possibly do, ideally organic, lots of vegetables. It's very individual, but this isn't instead of, it's to supplement. They are called supplements. It is about supplementing as good a diet as possible.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. With the testing, that's the reason I use hair analysis, because as you say, you can change from day to day. And the other thing that I recommend people do is check their pH levels, which you can check your urine and your saliva. So the hair mineral analysis and the pH testing gives a good indication of what's going on in the body. But as you say, with a multivitamin, that covers all bases, doesn't it, at the end of the day?
Yes,
and,
yes.
So what's special about Usana then? Because there are other supplement companies around, of course, but what's so special about Usana? Why have you stayed with it for 23 years? I mean, that's quite remarkable.
I know, it is remarkable. I'm not sure I ever thought I'd be staying that long, but who knows? I probably hadn't planned that far ahead. I think what attracted me to Usana in the first place was the science, the founder of the company and the science behind the products. And knowing that every single ingredient is backed by extensive research and continues to be. So the formulas do change as further evidence becomes available. Usana are leading the way in always having, the best combinations, the best levels. So where there's more evidence becomes available, they're there at the forefront. They don't just stick with what they already know, they're always improving. So they've got a big department of scientists, PhD scientists, a lot more than most nutrition companies, and they're constantly improving all the time.
Where are they based, Sherry?
They're based in Utah, in the States. And it seemed to be, or certainly, the company's 30 years old, so it was already pretty well established when I was first introduced and I first started taking the supplements, and they'd only recently come to the UK. And yeah, what it seemed to be at the time, it seemed to be that the Americans, I don't know whether this is still the case, but then the Americans seemed to be ahead of the English in terms of their nutritional research. That probably is still the case, but certainly in the case of Usana. Yeah. So that's what kind of got me started, that did impress me. The founder of the company, I always really liked his story. I've met him quite a few times, and he's just a really, really lovely person. And he's on our page in lots of ways. Um, uh, he before he's like in his, I think he's just 80 actually now, but he's still involved, but not in a big way with the company. But he's still there. Um, but before he started Usana, he actually had owned a or ran or owns a laboratory, and he was here with his company. He was the first. They produced viral diagnostic kits, so they were the first people to develop kits that would test the Epstein-Barr virus, glandular fever, and then they went on to, I think, 12 or 13 other viruses that they could diagnose. So before then, I think that was in the 70s. Before then, there was no diagnosis for those things that we take for granted now, like glandular fever. And in doing this, he was growing the cells. So Gull Laboratories was the first lab to be able to grow human cells. And they were feeding human cells to keep them in perfect condition. So he kind of became a healthy cell expert, shall we say. And then he was working really long hours himself. And one day, he become quite run down, quite unwell. Um, and one of the staff, somebody said, "Oh, you need some multivitamins," and put this pot of multivitamins on his desk. And he eventually picked them up and looked at the label, and he was just absolutely horrified. And this was like the number one seller at the time in the States, and he was absolutely horrified with what was in there. The format was wrong, the forms of the ingredients were wrong, the forms of the vitamins and minerals were wrong, the balance was wrong, everything was wrong. He was just looked at this and he was horrified. And then he took it into the lab and got them to analyze it, and actually realized that what it said on the label wasn't even in the product, or wasn't exactly right, or even in some cases anywhere near what it said on the label. And this was just horrendous. And he, in his business until then, his science world, he had kind of set the gold standard in diagnostics. But he actually realized, though he made a difference, made a positive difference in the world, he could make more of a difference. Rather than diagnosing diseases, what if he could help prevent diseases? Because he'd become such an expert in the human cell and nutrienting the human cell, he decided then to sell Gull Laboratories and start a new company, which he called Usana. Usana, by the way, the word comes from the Greek and Latin meaning true health.
Oh, didn't know that.
Strange word. Like, does it stand for, United States of America, something else? No, it's not. It's actually true health. So right from the outset, when he started the company, this was very much about. He sold for millions. He was also already a very wealthy man. He didn't do it for the money. He did it because he knew that he could make a huge difference. So it was always from the outset, there was never any possibility that he would compromise in any way. This was always about producing the gold standard in nutritional supplements. So he started with a very small range. We don't have a huge range still, but he started with the multivitamins, then called the essentials. They're now called the cell essentials, and one or two other products, and then it's expanded from there. So it's very much about the quality. It's about the science, the quality of the ingredients. Every single ingredient that they make everything in house. That's also really unusual. Most supplement companies will farm out to other manufacturing and then stick their label on. I say most, I don't know if that's, I think it is most, but yeah, so everything that all the supplements that Usana makes are made in-house. So they obviously have a much better control over the standards and so on. All the ingredients when they come in to the factory, to the manufacturing site, they are all tested. They're tested for purity, for potency, for any kind of contaminants, any bacteria, anything that may have got into the ingredients. They're tested and then they go into quarantine for 6 months, and then they're tested again before they're used in the supplements, and that is really unheard of. And then throughout the whole manufacturing process, there's still testing going on. So there's sampling from the conveyor belt. Tablets are taken off and tested just to make sure that every stage they're exactly as they say on the label. So this is really, really unusual with supplements. So with Usana, they're made to a pharmaceutical standard, which means that every single tablet is guaranteed to have in it what it says on the label. For most supplements, that's not the case, and they're not expected to be manufactured to that standard.
How interesting. I didn't know that story of the efficacy of it, and the production and everything is just quite remarkable, actually. And a lot of supplements, when you look at the labels, the first thing on there is the filler. They pack out with things that are nothing to do with supplements. They just fill the capsule or
Yes.
whatever it is with
Yes.
with nonsense.
Yes,
So it's so
absolutely.
important to read the labels, isn't it, of whatever we
Yeah.
take.
It is. There are some fillers, but the use of the word we have to be a bit careful with, because they are called fillers or excipients, but they're not there to fill it to make it bigger, because actually the USAR tablets are quite big because there's so much in there, so much of the good stuff in there. There's absolutely no way they want to fill them out to make them bigger. That wouldn't help sell them, just because because the levels are so good in there. But they do need certain things, like to make things stick together. So otherwise it would just be a powder or whatever it would be. So they do need some kind of excipients to help things bind and stick and coat and all of that, which can be loosely called fillers. So it's kind of a tricky one. It's like, I suppose it's about knowing the company and trusting the quality, and knowing that they absolutely wouldn't fill it up with rubbish.
Yeah,
But use the
absolutely.
minimum amount of fillers or excipients that they need.
Yeah, brilliant explanation, thank you. And it's what you said in the beginning about balance, isn't it? It's all about balance. And a lot of people say, oh, I take zinc or magnesium or calcium or whatever because that's what we should be doing. And particularly in the last couple of years, we've had lots of recommendations to take a trio of different supplements. But if the balance doesn't suit our body, then we're barking up the wrong tree and actually potentially making ourselves worse.
Yes.
And I had a client recently who had to have surgery on her leg. Her leg became so painful, and it was literally about to snap. Her bone had become so thin, and they had a what do you call it? A steel. They pinned it. They put a steel something or other in it to strengthen the bone. And when she did the hair mineral analysis with me, her calcium was off the scale. She had got way too much calcium, and people don't realise that they're taking calcium for their bones, but if it's in the wrong balance, it actually leaches from the bones. It doesn't support the bones, so it's really important to have the balance.
Yes, absolutely. And always to have magnesium whenever you have calcium in a supplement. And of course, this is something that I've been aware of for many years, that the one that gets prescribed here, I don't know what it's called now. It's changed its name, but I think it used to be called Calci-Chew, which is calcium and vitamin D. It is called something else now, and I can't remember what it's called. But as far as I can see, it hasn't changed very much at all, if at all. And it doesn't have any magnesium, and that's really important, because it's also about where that calcium goes in the body. So if you have to, so sometimes the calcium can go into the joints, and people have calcified joints, or Yeah, it's complicated. It's very complicated, but having everything as a balance is really important. And certainly in the Self Essentials, the multi, there's absolutely nothing in there that is harmful if you have too much. So just to give you an example, iron, I'm sure you know, Elaine, that iron is something that you should only have in the form of a supplement if you know you are depleted, if you know your iron levels are low. If you have too much iron, which people do if they're having lots of processed foods, for example, breakfast cereals that are fortified with iron, then it's not uncommon to have a build-up of that iron, which causes problems to the liver. So our multivitamin doesn't contain iron because it is for everybody. So sometimes people are low in iron, and they might want to take it separately, or actually we do a multivitamin which is almost the same, which is actually a prenatal. It's almost the same, but it has iron in there because most women pre and during pregnancy will need some extra iron. So occasionally people who have got nothing to do with being pregnant will take the prenatals just that they get the extra iron, get the iron in there. And vitamin A is another one that people often get really worried about. You can take too much vitamin A, it can cause this, it can cause that. So the natural form of vitamin A is beta carotene. Most multivitamins would just have vitamin A in them. So ours has beta carotene with a little bit of vitamin A because some people are unable to convert. So beta carotene is the natural form that you'll find in your carrots, etc. And it's just like eating 2 carrots a day. You're not going to overdose, but some people are unable to convert the beta carotene into the vitamin A that they need. So we have beta carotene and a small amount of vitamin A as well, but not so much that anybody could possibly overdose on it.
Brilliant.
So yeah.
And I think that's also the importance, as you've demonstrated, of knowing the products. So when you go to health food stores and there's so many other products for sale in there, the assistants don't always know what they're selling you. So I think it's really important that obviously you've done your homework. You've been doing this for 23 years, and you know everything inside out, which is wonderful.
Yeah. And I have access. I mean, I'm sometimes there's so much I still don't know, and I'm absolutely not a scientist, but I do know who I can ask when I
Yes,
need
yeah.
to. So I have scientists that I can access, and I have doctors on my team. So where there's a medical condition involved, there's people I can always ask, which is important. But like to
Brilliant.
say about the stores, just to tell you a little story, but when was it? I don't know. A few months ago, I was in the pharmacy for something or other, and I was waiting in the line, and the woman in front of me was being served, and she was asking for something for her. I think it was for 2 teenage children, a son and a daughter, and she started off with her daughter, and she wanted some sort of multivitamin. I can't remember what the reasons were, but anyway, she was like, well, there's this one and there's this one, and they picked them, and the woman said, oh, well, this one's £15.99 and this one's £22.99. What's the difference? Why would I pay the more expensive one? And she just turned them over and she went, well, this one's got 16 ingredients and this one's got 20 ingredients. Oh, okay, well, I'll get the 20 ingredients then. And I'm just like, I can't say a word. I'm just standing there as a customer, and it's like, oh my goodness, this is horrific that people are choosing their multivitamins based on the number of the ingredients. And then it went on to, my son's really run down, and she sold him, I don't know if you're familiar with Floridix,
Oh
which is an
no.
iron. It's an iron supplement. And really, boys in particular, so we lose the iron, but for anybody listening, we lose iron if we're menstruating. So sometimes women can become low in iron, but it's very unusual for men and boys to become low in iron. And this is what she was recommending for this teenage boy, and I just had to stand there and bite my tongue. It was just awful, really. But little things like that just reinforce for me how important it is to have good quality products, but provided by a company that provides the education as well, provides the information. So I'm not just selling any old product to anybody. Yeah.
Really important. Information, balance, and education around what we're doing, why we're doing it, and so on is so important. So
Yeah.
thank you for explaining all that, Sherry. It's really, really helpful. So how do people get
Yeah.
hold of you?
Oh, well, you can get hold of me through my website, which is cherryscott.usana.com. That's probably the easiest way. I'm on Facebook, Cherry Scott. Don't know what the rest of my Facebook link is. I'm on LinkedIn, but I don't use it very much. I'm not big on social media. Most of my customers come through referrals. I meet lots of lovely people through networking as well. So yeah, just probably cherryscott.usana.com. Certainly I can give you a phone number if you're adding it to anything
Yes, sure,
in a
please
written
do.
form. Yeah. Do you want me to tell you now or do you want me to?
Yes, so not everybody's going to be watching this or seeing. They're probably, some people would just be listening to this on audio. So yes, if you're happy to give your
Okay.
phone number, please do.
All right. So my phone number, because I'm in the UK, is 07800 946 269.
Marvellous.
07800 946 269. Very happy for anybody to get in touch through on my
Marvellous.
phone. Yeah,
And
great.
just to for the clarification, how are you spelling Usana?
USANA.
Usana. So
Cherry Scott. And cherry,
cherryscott.usana.com.
cherry is just like the fruit. Scott with two T's. .usana.com.
Marvellous. Thank you very much for your time today, Cherry. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.